The name Sylvia Collicott has been mentioned already, and I, like Lucy, am another fan of her approach. I am a big believer in moving from the local to the national to the global, because the traditional approach has always been the other way around, and I think this really misses a lot of pictures, misses a lot of targets, especially living in London. A lot of young people are very parochial, and trying to explain concepts involving international trade, other times, other places, can be a problem. Hence my belief in a lot of my practice with young people and with teachers that history starts at home, especially for those of us. Okay, I'm very, very aware as well of the feeling of being an interloper coming here with my London ways from that London. But by way of excusing that interloping, I've got to say that I believe firmly from experience that all of these methods and approaches will work as well in the West Country due to the sterling work that's already been done by Lucy, Louisa, etc. But yeah, history starts at home. We start from what we know. We start from the local. We start from the hyperlocal. For example, if I am working in Southwark, say a particular part of Southwark, Camberwell, I will almost certainly immediately go to parish records parish records from those particular wards. Say, for example, St Giles, Camberwell. What we have with a lot of local history records, particularly in London and also in the West Country, is a super abundance of black lives which can be gained from the baptismal and death registers which can be found in many of these churches. Extraordinary lives, excuse me, extraordinary lives which give us insights not just into local politics and local history, but the way that these local histories extend throughout the nation and by extension overseas as well. It's a way of making the familiar, it's a way of moving from the familiar to the new. Particularly when you're looking at the lives of young people, young black people, the lives of young black boys and girls are very much central to this story, particularly when we're talking about enslavement and the patterns of enslavement that you find, or you would have found, here in the British Isles. Large numbers of these individuals were young people who had been brought here as, no nice way to say it, almost like household pets or walking, talking objets d'art to adorn the houses and properties of the great and the good. So by getting young people involved in the stories of young people, I found it to be a great learning tool. You can get them to write themselves into the character. The more we know about them, the more we can flesh out the potential lives and times of these individuals. Learn to love the archives. I'm a big believer in taking young people to their local archives to see how the local archives work, to actually get as close as the archivists will permit to archival material. I've had some extraordinary results with this. Just the other, about 2 months ago, I did a small project at the National Archives inviting young people between the ages of 8 and 18 to examine material connected, or rather letters, mostly correspondence, connected to the race riots of 1919, the extraordinary race riots which nobody ever talks about, but between January and August of that year, 9 port cities were engulfed in extraordinarily violent race riots for reasons which we really don't have time to go into. But what we do get from the archives are the two perspectives, the 2 points of view. You have the Mandarin's eye view from Whitehall, and you have the perspective of the ordinary black or Asian seafarer who finds himself stranded in this country and is appealing for justice, is making his plaints on behalf of himself and his family in extraordinarily difficult circumstances, all of which sounds comparatively dry until you get to the material itself and you read the words which were written in this beautiful cursive. Young people love decrypting cursive. It can be 18th century cursive, it doesn't matter what the hand, they love it as a challenge, as a test. A lot of teachers in particular are very hesitant about letting their little lambs loose near this precious material. But there is, I've noticed, a wonder that passes over a lot of young people's faces, particularly in that last exercise I did at the National Archive. There's a wonder which passes over the young people's faces when they realize what they are looking at. What they're looking at is actually history, and it's history made by people like them. And the questions that came out of that session were amazing, from young people who came in very disaffected. They did not want to be there. And it was hard for them to leave. They were asking questions about the nature of archives, who owns archives, who are they for, what's it all about. They wanted to know about how they should or should they be archiving their own material. Anyway, result. Long story short, I'm a big believer in introducing young people to archives as much as possible, because ultimately they'll be paying for it through their taxes. They have to know that as well. It's very important. In terms of selecting material to use, I believe in sort of turning the tables on the roots approach. There is a lot of, it's not even controversy, there's a lot of wariness, not just amongst teachers, but particularly, and I'm talking about London now, amongst young Londoners and young Londoners of colour, with the sorts of material that are used to introduce them to black histories, particularly the histories of enslavement, which are profoundly, cosmically ugly and painful. My way to address this is twofold. The first problem I have, particularly in London, and I think increasingly in the home counties, and I'm a strong feeling it could be the case here as well, the first problem I have to deal with is the reality that I deal with majority mixed classrooms, not just mixed in terms of standardized racial descriptions, but also mixed in terms of people of African origins, where they are from. The majority of classrooms I'm in, people from Caribbean backgrounds are very much in a minority. And people of immediate continental African backgrounds are in a majority. So, do I tell the same stories in the same way? The stories, I think, do have to be changed. We have to be giving a different narrative. The expectation cannot be that someone whose immediate family is from, say, Nigeria, or often Somalia or Cameroon, is going to have that emotional attachment, that sentimental connection to histories of enslavement across the Atlantic that my children would. So the narrative has to be changed, it has to be tweaked, and for both young people from the Caribbean who have connections to the Caribbean and the majority population, there has to be another way of looking at this, of examining these extraordinarily ugly subjects, which does not involve absolute oppression and elimination of their personalities. And to that end, I do lead with themes, as I say here, of self-determination, empowerment and initiative, particularly when those stories concern young people. And there is a superabundance of such material in archives, newspapers, and all over. And thirdly, basically building on the last point, I'd like to highlight a variety of life trajectories to state that, yes, not everybody was enslaved, that throughout the course of the 400 years or so of history that I look at, you saw people of African origins engaged in a variety of experiences. You saw individuals who were not just enslaved. Some of these individuals were not people that we'd like. There's an additional point I should have added here, which is to invite controversy. A lot of the people that we come across, a lot of these are African princes, a lot of these men of letters were not people we'd personally want to invite to dinner. They were massively compromised, and they were tradespeople, but some of them were trading in human lives. Some of this stuff has to be discussed, and I don't think young people are ever too young to begin to tackle this stuff. In fact, when you're in mixed classrooms, they will prompt discussion of this, whether I like it or not.